Hey, I'm Ellecia, your non-monogamous relationship coach. Welcome to the podcast where my friends and I chat about our relationships, enthusiastic non-monogamy, polyamory, swinging, kink, and our lives. You'll get a candid peek into what makes it worth it to live life outside the box. And in case you're still wondering, nope, we're not monogamous. What do courtesans, coffee presses, polyamory, and decriminalizing sex work have in common? These are all things that I'm talking to Numina Mara about today. A fantastic fucking human and a fantastic conversation. I might have a little bit of a crush now. You probably will too after you listen. If you enjoy the show, like, subscribe, leave us a review. Let us know what you think, please. Or send me an email and let me know what you think. I would love to hear from you.
Got it.
And call it good.
Oh, and it says got it.
It was copying you.
It had to. I made Zoom do a thing. Right.
Yeah. So like the show is Nope, We're Not Monogamous. Right.
Excellent.
And so kind of really what I like to do is just talk about non-monogamy and relationships and like all the different pieces of it and the experiences that people have and anything else that just pops up.
Which can be a lot. Like anyone who's been consensually and ethically non-monogamous for a while will tell you that there's so many intersections between like polyamory and swinging and so forth, and like kink and LARPing, and
Right?
it's a whole bunch of circle Venn diagrams, really.
I know. It's funny because I've in the way that I work, I run into people who really like who those diagrams don't overlap. And I'm like, this is weird. Like,
Oh, wow.
I know, right? Like, I know swingers who are exclusively swingers and have no interaction with kinksters or polyamorous folks, and
Huh.
also like all the way around there. And I always say, like, where all of those intersect is where I like to play.
Oh yeah, you get all the colors of the rainbow
Uh-huh.
there, and that's my favorite flavor.
Uh-huh. Exactly. So I'm curious, what does non-monogamy look like for you?
Well, I could always give the like very basic, very overarching official meaning, which is just choosing not to be monogamous. So, not in committed, specifically only that relationship at any one given point in time. But for me, it falls more under, I've heard it referred to as polyanarchy or solo
Mm.
poly. I do tend to have a main partner at any given point in time, someone who I tend to spend the most time with and harass most often. They get most of the perks of having as much attention from me as I can give them, but they also, have to deal with the emotional sobbing at 2 a.m. It doesn't happen often, but oh, when it happens. Um, so it's a polyanarchy, usually with a main focus partners, and sort of as things fluidly change. I've had my main partner for 6 years and my secondary partner for just slightly longer than that. And I use the term secondary. He's just been a part of my life for so long, but we don't see each other a whole ton. So some people have
Mm.
referred to them as like comets or satellite partners, but no, he's a goddamn delight. Oh, I should probably ask, can we use the
Oh,
blue
you can swear all you
language?
want. I don't fucking care.
Fuck yeah. Okay. That'll be much easier for me because otherwise it's like, oh my goodness.
No, I check all the boxes when I look. Yes, this is explicit. Yes, this is
Excellent.
sexual in nature.
I know so much about that life. Let me know how sexual it must get. But yeah, it's very fluid. It's very active communication, very we'll deal with that as we get to it, but with just rules as we need them. So it's been very nice, honestly.
That's wonderful. Have you always been polyamorous?
So that's a tricky question.
Uh-huh.
I've the way I kind of tend to describe it is that I've been poly since before I knew what poly was.
Mm-hmm.
I was in high school and I ended up having some boyfriend who was definitely a handful, but his heart's good and it still is, honestly. We're still connected on Facebook, but I wasn't particularly sexually active at the time. Like I read and wrote fan fiction and was very, very active with myself, but I wasn't super comfortable getting past a lot of the stigma I got from religion. So I wasn't super sexually active with another partner. And he ended up meeting up with someone who was a little more experienced and said, hey, I think I might want to try this. Is that something you're okay with? And my response was like, are you gonna be with me afterward? And I realized that's really all I cared about was but can we hang out after? Can we still make out and fondle each other? Because like if that's gonna make it weird, I'd really rather you didn't. But yeah, I don't give a fuck. Like, yeah, and go touch butts. I don't give a shit. Have fun. Because I'm not doing it. And if I'm not doing it, why would I be mad that someone else was?
Yeah.
So that's kind of how it started in my head because I never really understood conceptually why I would need something to be exclusive for it to be good. And I ended up in monogamous relationships after that, and I am fully capable and relatively comfortable in them because I don't have a lot of time or energy. But just every time I've had the opportunity to give them the option or give any of my partners the option to sort of go and have other partners, have other friends, have other experiences, I'm usually just excited to hear about it later. And like not even in a sexual way, but like in a you got to ride that roller coaster. I've never been to that roller coaster sort of way. So I guess yes, I've always kind of been poly, but I've had monogamous relationships here and there because you care about people. And sometimes those
Yeah.
people are a little less comfortable with sharing. And it can be a little stifling, but no relationships last forever. People die.
Yeah. At the very least.
Right, right. All things go well, it's still going to end. So, like, let's take care of each other.
I love that.
Yeah.
Oh, that's so good. I mean, honestly, like I don't I've talked to some people who are just kind of naturally have always fallen into that, but for most people that's not the case, right? Like most people have to overcome a lot of fucking conditioning.
Oh, absolutely. And there are a lot
Yeah.
of hurdles to get over, especially if you have like a fear of loss, which as human beings, we all do
Hmm.
on some level.
Yeah.
But once I got past, and this is a whole lot more a long story, but once I got past some less than stellar behaviors I developed in an unhealthy relationship that was also poly, I had some abandonment issues, like a lot of them. And I was really, really, really easily triggered by like specific phrases or certain body language. And not in a, oh no, I'm afraid I'm going to get like physically attacked. It was, this means I'm not going to see you again. This
Mm.
means you're going to hold this against me. This means that that's going to be the one person you're interested in only ever forever and you're going to be mad at me because I'm a nuisance. And it took me years to get over that, and that's as someone who's comfortably poly and has been for most of my life. So therapy, kids, everyone should go to therapy.
That's what I was going to ask is how did you get over that hurdle?
It, it, I'm poor. So most of my therapy ended up coming from a lot of my friends and
Yeah.
a lot of the healthier community I've been able to build over the years. Um, Fortunately, I got to see enough healthy, functional relationships and enough extremely unhealthy, dysfunctional relationships from the outside. So I was able to kind of piece bits together and got a little bit better at like seeing things from the outside so that I could advise myself and maybe take some of the advice sometimes a little.
Right?
Hmm.
I think that that is I mean I give a lot of fucking advice and then I turn around and I'm like, huh, maybe I should take that.
It's like, oh, that was to me.
Uh-huh.
Ouch.
Uh-huh.
Yeah, same. Actually, a lot of my personal growth has come from spending time with people who gave me a need for personal growth. Lady, why are you back there? Sorry, the cat has decided she needs to live behind my monitor.
I mean,
Um,
it seems like an appropriate place for a cat.
Obviously, so I'm just going to move the loud stuff out of the way and let her do that. There you go. Sorry about that.
That's fine. It's fine. I was gonna ask you. What was I gonna ask you? It was something about that.
Yeah, we were talking therapy. We're talking getting over toxic behaviors that come from bad relationships.
Oh, yeah, I remember. Before I hit record, you had mentioned that you're out to pretty much everyone, and
Mhm.
so I was gonna ask you about that, about is there a non-monogamous coming out story
Well,
or a gradual life thing?
it's yes and no. So I've been the kind of odd duck for long enough that most people have always just sort of assumed that I was doing strange and edgy things. So I just kind of had to confirm their suspicions when it was true, and sometimes when it wasn't, because I think it's funny. It's not the healthiest or most reasonable thing to do, but if someone's going to assume I'm doing weird nonsense, why would I stop that? Um, but I mean, my younger brother is also in a polyamorous relationship. And can you hear that bag in the background? I'm going to go fight a cat. Just a second. I'm going to mute.
Okay, you were talking about your little brother.
Yes. My younger brother has been in a polyamorous relationship for years, years and years. So that was already kind of broached with my hardcore evangelical parents. Um, so it was relatively easy for me to drop the like, well, I mean, he's not my only partner, but that's not a problem. And like, if I thought you'd want to meet the other ones, I'd introduce you. But honestly, they're busy, you're busy. Why bother? And fortunately, my conservative Christian dad will sort of fall back on his military experience and go, hmm, that's a thing I know now, and then carry on with his life.
Uh-huh.
So
It
he's gotten
works.
so used to us throwing curveballs at him that he just kind of like, and if it's really heinous, it's don't tell your mom. Uh, and it's never a, I don't want you to be who you are. It's a, I don't want to deal with that trauma right now.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Oh, that's awesome.
Yeah, I am what happens when a good, sweet, virginal little Christian girl meets a military guy who was a carny by the time he was 16. Uh, and everything goes weird from there. Go figure.
Mm, strange.
But no, I haven't had a whole ton of like coming out as poly stories because I kind of, everyone's always kind of assumed I was.
Mm-hmm.
And I've always been weirdly open about the, well, I mean, he's one of them. And people always think I'm joking.
Uh-huh. Yeah.
That's on them.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I love the show Lucifer because he's
Mm.
so honest and people just
Oh,
think he's
yeah.
joking and I'm like, that's just what I do.
Yeah, same.
It's
That's
yeah.
very much a technique I tend to follow through with. If you're going to make a correct assumption, then I'm going to go, well, some days. And if you're going to make an incorrect assumption, I'll use a slightly more playful tone and you get to tell the difference there. And it's not easy. So,
I
and
love it.
of course, any actual direct questions are answered with often obnoxious amounts of honesty and information because I've kind of been an open book for so long. It's hard to curb that.
Mm-hmm.
Even in my more risque aspects of my life, I tend to be as honest as I can be while staying safe. Like, I'm not going to tell you exactly where I live, but I can tell you the general area where I grew up. And like, I'm not going to tell you like my first, last, and middle name, but I'll let you know like how to get my attention and things like that. So there are always ways to get to know people without giving them information that could easily be used against you.
Mm-hmm.
So I tend to go with that because sort of my background and because people can be really awful, especially when they're hurting, and a lot of people are
Mm.
hurting. So,
Yeah. Yeah. So speaking of your background, tell me a little bit more about that. You've done some pretty fun, colorful things.
so I ended up becoming a member of a honestly, a sex club up in Seattle by the time I was 19, because it was the safest place I could go and dance around like an idiot in my belly dance gear and my big rhinestone collar and cuffs. And no one would try and grope me. No one would try
Mm-hmm.
and bump into me. No one would harass me. Like every once in a while, people would come and dance with me on the dance floor while we listened to industrial and grunge and stuff. And like I got to have the most fun in the world. Well, I met a number of people who were involved with adult entertainment in general. One in particular was a sort of, she described herself as a shamanic healer, and
Mm-hmm.
she's good at it. She's essentially a therapist and body worker. She has a history in massage therapy, like years and years of massage therapy. And some part of my heart, and this is going to be a little squishy and hyperbolic, but like I always wanted to be a geisha. Like
Mm.
in cultural appropriation aside, even a courtesan, like I loved the idea of spending my entire life cultivating art
Mm-hmm.
and music and beauty and joy and just conversation. Because as human beings, especially in the United States, we've really been separated from the joy of living versus the obligation of living.
Yeah.
And a lot of people lack affection or even direct and attentive interactions with other people. And as social creatures, which human beings are,
Mm-hmm.
we need that. It is literally a need. People lose their minds when they've been sort of hidden away for too long. So I would, it sounds a little silly now, but like I would literally cry myself to sleep thinking about how courtesans don't exist anymore. Like it's illegal, it's bad, it's scary, it's all of this awful stuff. And then I met one. And oh my God, everything in my life was different because this mythical, it's like being told that you could be a unicorn for me.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I wanted desperately to jump in feet first. And I dabbled and I had a wonderful time, honestly. I cannot say that there's anything I felt more called to than, for lack of a better term, escort work.
Yeah.
Just divine company and companionship. Any physicality aside, like having someone you enjoy spending time with you, knowing that the time you are with them, you are the only person that they see, is huge.
Yeah.
And it's a service that more people should have access to.
Yeah.
But you also got to eat. So there's definitely an energy exchange in the form of gifts and so forth. But because of some interpersonal things there, I ended up leaning a little more into some of my non-adult themed work, which was exhausting and draining and terrible and painful, but consistent.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't have to deal with the real dangers in the adult entertainment industry, which is law enforcement
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
people who aren't willing to screen or do anything like that because they're afraid of law enforcement.
Yeah.
So that's a
And this
whole
is our
long
plug
rant I
for
could go on.
decriminalizing sex work.
Thank you. 100%. So I was going to say there's a whole long rabbit hole we could go through, and there are a ton of like links and things that I'm sure I could refind. For a while, I was a member of SWAP Seattle, but there were some issues with the leadership there
Mm.
and some interpersonal madness and biting. And there are a few performers and providers, pardon me, there who they are hugely respected and hugely respected by me because I've performed with some of them and I've spent time with a lot of them. And while there isn't a really great unified front right now, there are a ton of outreach programs
Mhm.
by sex workers for sex workers. And I don't know how likely it is I'm talking to any new and budding workers or entertainers in the industry, but if you ever interact with anyone who is claiming to do an outreach or to assist or to offer anything at all, if they are not themselves sex workers, active or retired, do your homework.
Yeah.
And I personally won't trust them at all
Yeah.
because there are so many people who want to save consenting adults who are doing what they enjoy from being consenting adults doing what they enjoy.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. I've seen a
Sometimes
lot
it's
of
well
that.
meaning, sometimes it's a little less so. But weirdly, fortunately, very recently, there's been a late night TV show that actually did some of the best journalism on sex work and decriminalization. And I don't know if I'm supposed to plug mainstream shows, but
Yeah.
the Last Week Tonight with John Oliver
Oh, yes. I
did,
saw that. It was so
oh God,
good.
it's the first time that I have seen a non sex worker tell the truth about sex work and
Yeah.
the actual dangers and the actual complications there. And like, I cried.
Yeah. Yeah. Everyone should watch that. Definitely. It
Yeah,
was really, really good.
anyone who cares about sex workers, is a sex worker, or is interested in maybe being or seeing one someday should watch that video.
Hmm.
It's not that long. It's so informative. And the more people watch it, the more likely I am to maybe someday get to do what I actually care about doing without the fear of criminalization. And I'd
Yeah.
love that.
Yeah. Yeah. I think it really is a much needed service. Like, I mean, even if I think about like, and I don't know the history of things actually,
Mhm.
but I
Yeah.
have this idea that there was a time when young people could go to some sort of a temple and be taught how to give and receive pleasure in a non-traumatizing way.
You would hope
Right? Like
so.
like
I don't know for
that's just what I
sure, but
picture. Like that's what I
right.
want. That's what I want for the world.
Me too, actually. Uh, very rarely is our first experience with sexuality with another person with a partner who is experienced and informed
Yeah.
with our best interests in mind.
Hmm.
There's a lot of difficulty because once you start looking for experience and you start looking for like the knowledge around it, you have to start worrying about whether or not they're taking advantage of the situation because you're
Hmm.
coming into it with way less power and
Yeah.
way less understanding of what you're getting into. So, if we could at some point have actual space for people who are professional sexy workers telling people real things
Yeah.
because I spent a full year doing sex work. Sex work, wow, I've done well, way more than a full year of that. I did a full year of doing phone sex. And while I was doing that, there were some clients who legitimately just wanted to interact with a person. They wanted to not be rejected or
Yeah.
attacked or anything. They're paying for a service, but they wanted to know if that's what you enjoyed. They wanted to talk about the things they were experiencing. It wasn't just a fantasy, it was therapy.
Yeah.
And excuse me, then there were people who wanted, you to tell them how much you enjoyed smearing poop all over your boobs. So there's a whole gambit of it.
The entire spectrum.
Right, right. Oh, that's not even, but we don't want to go into that, I assure you. But when you start seeing the fact that while it may only be like 10, 15% of the people who call in who actually want to know what you enjoy and so forth, then you understand that there are some people who aren't going to be as well served by the your desires. This is Emily. Oh, of course, I'm so horny. Yeah, I'm wearing stockings. Yeah, no, I'm wearing my fucking PJs. But some
And I'm holding a
people,
cat.
right, right. It's like I'm wearing my grandpa crop top. Yeah. Uh, there are there are so many parts of the industry that are made for the fantasy, that are made for the arousal, for the like full-on mainstream pornography. And then there are parts of the industry which are just people looking for human connection
Yeah.
and affection and attention and like companionship. And I just wish there was an easier way for them to get that companionship, which another fun little plug, uh, weirdly enough, OnlyFans has been a relatively effective method for that. Now, there are honestly some, from what I've heard, substantially more ethical sites like Fansly and a few other ones that I can't think of off the top of my head, but Fansly I've heard really good things about, where or Just for Fans, that's the other one,
Oh,
where you
yeah.
can kind of have like a social media pseudo friendship with the people that you like, yanking on it too. But
Hmm.
it's really hard to find that other
Hmm.
than on these websites, or if you're fortunate enough to have super sexy friends like I do, because like I get to speak to this lovely lady. Like, what a great after work treat. I was starstruck, I swear. But like the courtesan, for lack of a better
Yeah.
term, courtiers even, existed to have some kind of companionship, some kind of intrigue. And I feel like we lack that a lot in our culture, especially American culture,
Hmm.
because sex are bad. Cover yourself from head to toe. Don't let me see those ankles, which has led to a lot of the toxicity we deal with when it comes to young people coming into their sexuality.
Yeah. 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 It's kind of scary how we have this like really s- like sex oriented in the sense of like everybody wants sexiness, like sex sells, right?
Yeah.
And also, while you are supposed to look sexy and act sexy, you should not be thinking about sex or having sex.
Mm,
Like what?
yep.
It's wild.
Yep. It's the virgin and the whore. You
Yeah.
you are one or the other, but you don't want to be too virginal and you don't want to be too accessible. So I need access to you, but no one else can have it. But make it seem like it's kind of inconvenient for you, but don't make it seem inconvenient because I'm special and perfect.
Mm.
Like they're especially for femme people
Yeah.
dealing with the what is it, the Virgin and the Madonna or something like
Yeah.
that. It's dealing with the double standards that come into especially sexuality with femme people and women in general is tricky.
Yeah. It's confusing
Mhm.
and scary and weird, and we don't know what to do. And everybody's like, I'm gonna be good and bad all at the same time."
Right. There's a really beautiful, terrible little rhyme that I always very strongly identified with. But it's there once was a girl with a curl in her hair, and when she was good, she was very good. And when she was bad, she was horrid. And I do tend to be a bit polar like that. So you're either someone who I enjoy and would love to spend time with and would love to interact with, or you're someone who, at best, I'd like to ignore, and at worst, will be very blunt about not wanting you there. So,
Relatable.
yeah, yeah. And it's complicated, and I'm sure I could ramble on forever about it. But like, when it comes to human beings, not everything can be that polar.
Hmm.
And yeah, it's you bring up the unacceptable term body count. And
Ugh.
one of these days, I'm going to actually sit down and have no distractions, and I'm going to go through and figure out how many people I have had sex with. But I also need to figure out lines because poly and the queer community and sexy work, like, where are lines? Like, is a blowjob sex? It's oral sex, so it should be considered sex. What about fingering if you're both people with vaginas?
Hand
What about
sex?
cunnilingus? What about a hand job? At what point is it sex for people? Like, I've had more fulfilling sexual interactions with people without us taking off our clothing or going under the clothing at all.
Yeah.
Just dancing or like heavy petting or a really, really, really good makeout session that I got more fulfillment than PIV or penis and vagina interactions.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
but where
Yeah.
do we call it sex? How am I supposed to say whether I've been with 47 or 82 million people when I don't know exactly where the line is? And that's also part of why the whole like body count concept has
So
driven me a
silly.
little crazy.
That's funny. I have a story about that because being someone who came into my queerness later in life,
Mhm.
I was I was at a retreat and had seduced a beautiful woman. And when I came home, my girlfriend says, "Oh, well, did you guys have sex?" And I said, "No, we just made out." And she was like, "But were genitals involved in this making out?" I was like, "Oh, well, yeah." She's like,
Obvi.
"So you had sex?" "No, we made out." And she was like, "It's called oral sex, Ellecia." I was like, my mind was blown. Blown. I was like, I'm
Absolutely.
what? How how did I not like at up until I was 40 fucking years old, I never equated sex with anything other than like being penetrated by a penis.
Right. And that's
Everything
true
else
for a
is just
ton of
making
people.
out.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm relatively fortunate in that I I'm 33 next month, so 32 years old. So there's just enough generation gap there, and I was just on the hyper queer gay straight alliance member from high school on, kind
Mm-hmm.
of. I knew I was interested in femme people before I thought I was remotely interested in masc ones, which try and square that circle with an evangelical kid. But like, there's a reason I didn't get around to getting really into sex until I was like, oh shit, I can do this. And maybe there isn't someone staring at me while I do all of it.
Judging me.
Right. But I, for what I didn't get in sex ed, and I did get a substantial amount of information for sex education because of the health teacher we had.
Mm.
Uh, I ended up actually telling one of my friends from my shamanic priestess process I went through years and years ago that she should really be using a condom when she gives blowjobs. Because when I told her I was polyamorous, she went, "Well, you're being safe, right?" And I was like, "Well, yeah, I use condoms for people I'm not fluid bonded with for vaginal, anal, or oral interactions." And she was like, "Oral? You can't you can't get any diseases that way." And I'm like, "Oh, honey,
Mm.
you can." And that's something I learned in health class.
Yeah.
So once you start to learn like some of the nuance to it, it feels a little weird because Like, I became the sex guru for people 30 years older than me when I was
Uh-huh.
in my 20s. And that was a delight, honestly.
I love that. I wish everyone was able to get really good sex education and education around health and safety because it's so fucking important.
It's one of the only effective ways to have really great sex consistently.
Yeah. Yeah.
Be a sex nerd or talk to a sex nerd. We like talking about
Exactly.
sex. That's why we're sex nerds.
Exactly. Got questions? We'll play.
Yeah, like it may not be the horny answer you want. You can
Right.
pay me a little more for a horny answer. I can read you a bread recipe like I'm getting off. But if you want real information, you don't have to pay me for that. I'm just happy to spread the knowledge.
Hmm.
If you want me to moan while you're doing it though, like figure out my schedule.
Yeah. Oh my God, I love that.
Good times.
Oh, bread recipes.
Oh God, no, I've actually thought about it. That's one of the things I've considered but never actually like followed through on was finding little snippets from like poems or like weird books or literal recipes and just going down the list like I just love my big glass French press coffee maker. Oh, I couldn't live without it. Like, come on, like you can say literally anything you want, and if you say it in the right tone and you give a little, it works. It works for people. So
This
I
is
just need a
about to
script.
be my most listened to episode.
Oh no.
Rewind or back.
Do it again. Do it
Yeah,
again. Do
do
it
it
again.
again.
Do it.
Okay, let
Uh,
me ask you this. What is something that anybody can do for free to help them approach relationships in a healthier way?
well, there are so many things.
Mm-hmm.
Most of them come down to looking inward for long enough to not take someone's response to you as a personal attack. Uh, Even if someone comes out and says, I don't like your hair, your nose is ugly, and your teeth are terrible, what about them caused them to say, well, I don't like your nose? Like maybe your nose is fine. Maybe it's terrible. It looks great to somebody. And if someone's coming at you extremely critically, there's a good chance that they are also internally extremely critical. So
Yeah.
it doesn't have to mean anything about you when someone says, I feel like you're smothering me.
Mm-hmm.
The first knee jerk response that you want to have is, I'm not asking too much. How could you think that I'm asking too much? Not thinking, well, maybe this person very easily feels smothered.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe we can talk about ways that we can find connections together without triggering that response with them. So if you can come into it as, how can I accommodate your need for space rather than, why do you hate me? It'll be so much easier for everyone and it'll be healthier for everyone. So, yeah, introspection and owning that the things that you hear and the things that come out of other people's mouths aren't a reflection on you as much as they are a reflection of that person's perception of you.
Mm.
And once you can get past this is just what they're seeing, this is what they're experiencing, how can we make that work? Or should this work? Rather than, how am I wrong? Or
Yeah.
how are they wrong? Just when you see the full picture, any relationship can be healthy. And sometimes the healthiest relationships are the ones that aren't happening anymore.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh. Yeah. Yeah. That's real. That's real. I have a partner who says that there's no such thing as a bad breakup.
No, there's
Yeah.
no such thing as a bad divorce.
Yeah.
It can be ugly, it can be toxic, but divorces don't end good marriages.
Yeah.
They
Exactly.
end marriages, but just because it exists doesn't mean it should continue necessarily.
Mhm.
And to our knowledge, we only get one go at this. And I'm gonna fuck it up, but I'm gonna have fun while I do it. And I'd like to experiment and experience as much as I can in the time I'm given.
Yes, 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 yes. Absolutely. I love that.
And
Um,
that's why I talk dirty about bread recipes.
yes. And coffee presses, apparently.
And sorry, it was the thing that was sitting right in front of me. I couldn't control myself. It was that, or I was gonna start reading off weird advertisement things I have on my mouse pad. I was like, oh shit, oh shit, oh shit, think of
What do I have?
something.
What do I have?
Got like a Schilling's hard cider and the Bong Bible. It's a
I
real book.
mean, I feel like you've got two very niche audiences there. The
Bong
Bong
Bible
Bible.
and a Penguins book and
That's amazing.
my little desk is one of my happiest places. It's where I play Warcraft.
It's what?
It's where I play Warcraft.
Oh, well, there you go. That
Yeah.
that is the place.
Mental masturbation.
Thank you so much for listening today. It would mean the world to me personally and would help us keep this little podcast going if you would subscribe, leave a review, or share this episode with your friends. For more personalized support with your own relationships, we can work together on a one-to-one basis. Just visit my website at ElleciaPaine.com and schedule a free call to chat about life, the universe, and your relationships. Bye.